Woodstock! Yeah! I'm here today with Jonathan Chambers, right? Of the Cherokee Economic Development Group, which is basically, it's a city funded or county funded, right?
County funded, works with a bunch of the cities for economic development.
Okay, and he is the community manager for entrepreneurship.
Nailed it.
And so we're here at Copper Coin, which is actually when I was growing up, or not growing up, when I was a little bit older, but about 6 or 8 years ago, this is where I lived, like right above this coffee shop. So this is like a really cool opportunity to come back. I haven't been here in forever. But today we're gonna chat about what it's like to be in a community that is around a large, not only startup, but tech and city ecosystem like Atlanta. Like what is it like to be on these kind of outskirts, and how do you engage with those communities? I guess my first question is, give me a little bit of background on like who you are, where you come from, and what you did before this.
Yeah, this is always a hard question for me because I never know how far back to go.
This is the biggest Americana I've ever had.
Isn't that awesome?
I mean, this is gonna ruin my life.
Here we go. Cheers.
Cheers.
Born in Orlando, lived there for 10 years. Dad moved us to Statesboro, my brother and I.
Mm-hmm.
And Statesboro was Kmart and Pine Trees at the time. So,
did you go to, what was that, Georgia State?
Georgia Southern.
Georgia Southern, that's
yeah,
it.
GSU, the original GSU.
Yeah.
Whoa, I don't want to mess.
Is there another one?
I don't want to cause any issues with Georgia State.
I don't know anything about this.
No, there's a whole backstory about Georgia Southern and Georgia State and who had rights to the letters GSU. That's a whole nother story.
Well, it's like I went to Southern Poly and it was Southern Tech back in the day, and it was apparently a part of Georgia Tech or something like that at one point in time. So.
All right. Yeah, I don't want to step on any toes.
Exactly.
Yeah, I went to school at Georgia Southern, graduated high school in Statesboro. Long story short, started a business with my dad when I was still in college. And just the entrepreneurship bug bit us both. I mean, we were obsessed with trying to establish some kind of idea. So I did that for about 7 years, sold that company. While I had that, I had a mobile app startup at night.
What was that company?
The company during the day was called Citrus Solution. We were taking like a carpet cleaning technology and bringing it to residences in the area. So it was pretty cool. It was a pretty saturated market, but
it's like you can build a really big business off of, was it Service Pro and all that kind of stuff, but there's a lot of them. You can still build a huge business off of that, yeah.
And then I had a mobile app startup at night with some college guys for about 6 months, and that was a pretty cool ride until it crashed and burned. Yeah. Pretty painfully after about 6 months.
Was it like the partner breakup thing, or was it?
Not as much. There were some challenges behind like equity and all that kind of stuff. I think the biggest thing was right at the height of our quote success, my app developer who had all the IP. So this was a big lesson learned. If you have a startup and you haven't locked in your equity yet, you got to lock that in before you move forward with any IP. So he basically showed up at one of our team meetings and stood up and was like, "Hey guys, I've got another job offer in New York. I'm heading out. I'm taking all the mobile app IP with me. Good luck." And I was like, what am I going to do? Yeah. What do I have to offer? I mean, I'm building an app and I don't have any IP.
Did y'all not have a established relationship before, or was it?
Yeah. So we had developed some friendship over the course of 6 or 7 months through a startup competition, and it didn't get solidified apparently.
So after you, I guess eventually you left Statesboro. What happened? Like, when did you leave Statesboro?
Summer of 2016. It's a crazy story. Sold the business, sold our house, got the news of cancer for my wife.
Oh no.
Yep. And I'm laughing. I know that's not funny, but like with a period of over like 4 or 5 weeks, it was intense for our family. So, we were we're already moving to Woodstock. We had family up in Canton in this area, and we thought, how the heck are we going to do this? We're about to enter a crazy season. So, me being an entrepreneur, and as an entrepreneur, you're not wired necessarily to work on a team for a company. Yeah. So I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. We got to support my wife. So basically pursued a position at Tech Square Labs when I learned about their vision. And it's interesting, they didn't have anything open at the time. And I just looked at their vision for diversity and technology and the startup ecosystem, and this would have been 2016.
With Alan and Paul?
Alan and Paul, they had pretty much just opened 4 months prior to me looking into it.
That's cool.
And I was like, hey, here's my skill set, here's what I'm good at. If there's something I can do, I love what you guys are about. And I just chased them until they couldn't say no.
You came from Tech Square how did you get now to Woodstock?
To this, yeah. So, yeah, the commute was a big thing. I mean, having a business with my dad for almost 8 years locked me into this ecosystem of wanting to resource entrepreneurs, as well as having a startup at night and watching it fail. I was like, I really want to be around startups. So I had planned on being at Tech Square Labs for probably 5 or 10.
Yeah.
And I think combination of the commute mixed with just some vision changes with like, how do we plug into a local city?
Yeah.
Because I mean, me and all the commuters, you feel like you're living in 3 different or 4 different cities, right? You live in one city, you shop in the other, you work in a third city. It's like you struggle to find a sense of place.
Yeah. We're in Woodstock, Georgia, which is outside of the city of Atlanta, probably by about 20 to 30 minutes, right? You've got to build a community here that not only addresses what the future may be, right, which is somewhat technology, somewhat whatever the technology-enabled business is, right, but also what exists here. So how do you balance the concept of traditional entrepreneurship, which is like your brick and mortar, restaurants, franchises, services businesses, things like that, between what I think probably is more of the future, which is technology-enabled businesses or technology businesses that have technology at the core of, or intellectual property and technology at the core of their business?
Yeah, this is how much time do we have? I mean, this is one of the main questions I had starting out was, when you look at like a Tech Square Labs, my time there, high technology.
It's like, what do you want me to focus on? Right?
Yeah, exactly. You've got all these technical founders. You've got people disrupting industries, coding away at crazy stuff. Then you come to more suburban metro Atlanta, and there's not as large of a population of tech talent. So I think we had to kind of get to a point in the first 6 months to a year of the vision when I stepped in and really spend time listening to the local community, so that we weren't just telling them what we were going to do. We had to actually kind of pause and say, what are the needs? Because you'll have brick and mortar, bakery or a restaurant or whatever it might be. Their needs might be a little bit different from a guy who's developing an app in his basement.
Yeah.
And so a lot of it was just listening. And then I think what we learn is both the small business mindset and the startup mindset, there's some overlap with needs. Like they both could learn valuable resources and topics from similar workshops on marketing or sales or how to build a team or HR or what's your go-to-market strategy.
Yeah, so there's still core tenets.
There's still core principles that will apply. Yeah. But then paying attention to our local creatives and makers and developers, they have a little bit of a different need set. So we've kind of thought, how do we? So I'll give you an example. Okay. We took a field trip to Asheville. There's a lot of cool stuff going on in Asheville.
Oh yeah, so I worked for a company out of Asheville for a while. It was a technology startup. Or so we took, startup kind of, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, their ecosystem, they're several years ahead of Woodstock. They're obviously bigger.
Yeah.
So we kind of went there, let's learn from the future. Let's go there and spend time with the Venture Asheville folks and kind of looked at some of their stuff. Yeah. And really came back, and one thing we took away from that was build on your assets. So instead of me trying to force a culture or a community that's here, let me find out who's already here, what they're good at, what their needs are, and then build on that. So that's kind of what our focus has been the last year.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So how have you been able to resource the entrepreneurs that I found that brick and mortar entrepreneurs are entrepreneurs that don't necessarily have businesses that are like super forward facing, aren't necessarily engaged with a community that may be typically associated with technology or something like that, right? So how do you walk in and say, okay, Reformation Brewery, I'd really love you to come in and chat with our businesses or the businesses that engage with our Community and help them like get past some of the difficult hurdles, share your experiences. How do you resource those? How do you find them?
Yeah, that's good. I think a couple things. One is just playing on the connections that we have as a team. So there's a 20 to 30 almost year history with some of the people on our team with economic development in all of Atlanta.
Oh, cool.
So our president, Misty Martin, is really well known. She's been in economic development for a while. So relying on our connections and relationships that we already have. But then another thing is just practicing what we preach. If we're going to be a space that talks about collaboration, we have to collaborate. We can't be a silo. We can't just preach, hey, we're going to collaborate, and then actually go off and do our own thing. So we try to do that to a fault. So we're talking to businesses, we're talking to a Reformation brewery and asking, humble questions. What can we do better? How do we learn from you guys? How do we take what you guys have learned and apply it to the community? So we have interview series that we do where we spotlight entrepreneurs. We have early morning problem solving groups to get people that are probably in the zone. If they're a brick and mortar, they're stuck in their own world and they're not really open to the community. We invite them in and say, hey, get together in the morning and let's solve problems together. Crowdsource your problem solving and don't just try to figure it out on your own. So we're really trying to push the envelope and challenge people and then practice what we preach, and it's a slow process.
Yeah, I mean,
it doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I tried to preach in our last community was at a more macro scale, right? And I think these things transition as long as you can get the core concepts of your startup ecosystem can be a crowdsourcing mechanism for research and development within your community, right? Sure. And so if you look at it that way, and I think Atlanta does a good job at looking at it that way because they'll buy companies, larger companies will buy companies as new features of their business because they internally in their hierarchy of their organization cannot quickly get these things done. So they know that innovation may come from outside of that community, so or outside of their internal assets. And so I think if you can look at your community as something that you've got this underlying layer of people that are entrepreneurial, just need to be supported, but also will do things that will help boost your community, boost the efforts that are here in this town, and not necessarily cost you a ton of money, and also may add significant amount of value quickly. I think that's really interesting. And then I think the other thing is supporting the ones at the top. What's funny is like we look at the things at the top as like they've made it, but they haven't made it yet. Like a Reformation brewery, they're doing great, right?
Only
but they're not
5 years in.
Exactly. They're only 5 years in. They're not at the. I guess you could probably equate them to Sweetwater or something like that. Sweetwater's what 10, 12 years into this thing, right? And so maybe longer than that. I don't know, but like that is actually a little bit further down the road, right? And so it's interesting to see how you still have to support those ones at the top. I think when you're in big cities, you see that like with economic development incentives, like the film incentives and things like that. The film studios are at the top, but to make them at the top here and to make it even bigger, you have to continue to incentivize them to grow. So we've talked business, we've talked community building, we've talked what it's like to lead an entrepreneurial community. But what is you're not this? Like, do you play Frisbee? Do you play golf? Do you go fishing? Is it restaurants? What is the Jonathan Chambers outside of work?
Oh, personally, me? Who am I outside of work?
Yes.
Oh man. It's gonna go from PG-13 to rated. No, it's not gonna get that crazy. I mean, with a wife and 2 kids, one on the way. I've got a side hustle I'm working on, podcasting, production. Cool. It's pretty fun. You
got a voice for it, so that's good.
I don't know if I do or not, but we'll take it.
I feel like you do. Like, how has transitioning to an entrepreneurial community or growing up in an entrepreneurial community affected like your normal life? Do you like take more risks with kids, or like what do you do?
Definitely. I mean,
this is a super loaded question. Like I say loaded, but like it's a difficult question, right?
Yeah, it is, because it's got me thinking, which I like, but and I'm a processor, so I kind of process my thoughts out loud, so there's no telling what's going to come out.
I bet that's part of it, right? Like like just even be communication and things like that.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think one of the biggest things that's probably being a part of, like being an entrepreneur and then being in an ecosystem for the last couple of years has made me personally obsessed with feedback. So almost to a fault, right? If people that are close to me are like, man, he's always looking for feedback. And it's because I really value it. I mean, I truly do it, even though sometimes it might bring out some of my weakness and my vulnerability,
exactly.
But I use that to play to my strengths, because I rely heavily on like, what do you think happened here? Tell me what you think I should do. What am I doing well? What do you think about this? Because I'm just a naturally curious guy. So I think I've brought that into my marriage. I've brought that into my parenting. And it's just taught me how to be always open to feedback. I mean, it kind of forces you to be humble, right? Because otherwise you get to a place where you're like, well, I've figured out X, so I think I'm good. I think in the last 5 to 6 years being an entrepreneur, it's taught me to always be a learner, always learning.
That's one of the things that's a little bit difficult for people to realize, is that you are so typically as an individual ingrained with your work life that you don't realize how much that affects your external life outside of that, right? Yeah. We are naive to think that is not something that
they're like separate buckets.
Exactly, right? And it's going to inform the way you administer things with your kids and things like that. So I think that's really interesting. Well, this has been great. I've enjoyed it.
I have too, man.
I'm super stoked and excited for what's going on up here, because it didn't exist when I was here, and now it is. And I think this is an important part of, having a core central spot in Atlanta that then also you're able to pull from and create communities around it, because all it does is increase the density of thought and people trying to move things forward. So I think it's a great thing. So I'm excited. This has been great.
Yeah,
cool.
This has been good.
So I'll wrap it up right now, and then we can go. So again, we're in Woodstock here with Jonathan Chambers. He's with Economic Development for Cherokee, this has just been a fantastic conversation about what it's like to build a community outside of the primary community in your state. And I think it's something that just some of the tenets that we were talking about here about being, entrepreneurship isn't just about tech. Okay, it's not just about tech-enabled businesses. It's about businesses, period, and people that create something and take that risk, right? And so in communities like this, there's so many different forms of entrepreneurship that we don't necessarily account in these big technology hubs for, and that are still actually the primary driver of our economy. So I think it's really important for us to kind of get that lesson out of this, and I know that I've had the opportunity to hear this and get a lot more perspective on what that means. So this has been awesome, fantastic. Coffee Shop Talks out. Cool.
Yeah.